welcome back to another episode of Art in the Wild. Today's guest on the episode is me. This is going to be a shorter episode. This is just a story of something that happened last weekend. So I remember, I think it was on Daniel's episode. I was listening to it again. There was a point in the episode where I was talking about how, I'd never been attacked by an animal. I did get attacked by ruffed grouse, and I mentioned that. But I was like, but I've never really been attacked by an animal while doing wildlife photography. And that that changed on Sunday, I think it was. Last Sunday, yeah. So it all started after posting Phil's episode, right? And in Phil's episode, we talked a little bit about how he worked with northern goshawks in Utah. Did a little bit of banding, did some, observation, stuff like that. And then I got a text out of the blue. It was an audio message from a friend of mine who I haven't seen for a very long time. He was another guy who was on the Alaska trip with me and Phil, and I listened to the audio message, and he's like, "Hey, Martin, I've got a goshawk nest in northern Vermont if you're interested." Now, if you're not really familiar with northern goshawks, they're pretty hard to get. They're pretty elusive, especially like in the Northeast. I've never seen one. I'm 90% sure I saw one in southern New Hampshire earlier this winter, which was pretty cool. But aside from that, I've never seen a goshawk in the Northeast. Only goshawk I've ever actually seen confirmed, period, was one out in Montana when I was going to school. And it was like 400 yards away, perched on a tree. I saw this lump and I looked through my camera thinking it was a raven, took a shot, had to blow the image up like 200%, and then saw that little white eyebrow, freaked out realizing it was a goshawk, and then it disappeared, right? So this is a very elusive bird, and you do not get the chance to see them often at all. So I was really excited. So he's like, "Hey, are you interested?" I was like, "Hell yeah, dude. Like, are you kidding?" So he sends me the details, and it's this trail. And in one of his messages, he goes, "And you'll know when you're in the area of the nest because they'll freak out," right? Now, one thing that's also important to note about northern goshawks is they are notorious for being extremely aggressive around nesting sites. It's just kind of like their thing. And I knew this going into it, right? So I wake up at 4 a.m. I get out of the house around 4:40. I'm driving 3 hours northwest, right, up into northern Vermont from where I live. And I'm all excited and stuff, I'm all happy. I'm driving down, like 3 deer were just standing on the side of the highway at different points, but within like an hour, which was super sketchy. I'm going like 60, 70 miles an hour down the road, and then there's just a deer just kind of staring at me. I'm like, "Don't you dare," But it takes me 3 hours, and I get up into the area, and I try to find a place to park. It's on this, you have to pull over on a dirt road and then get onto a trail. And I was trying to find the best place to pull over, and I kept driving down the trail. There was this lady on her bike walking her dog, and I kept driving by her trying to find a place to park. It was really awkward. But yeah, it was this quiet little dirt road, and I pull over on this little patch of gravel, and I start walking. I find the trail, and I'm walking up it, and it's like gorgeous. The weather is perfect. It's super warm. There was a bunch of black-throated blue warblers and black-throated green warblers singing as well. I didn't end up seeing any of them, but there was a bunch of cool life just all around. And I was really excited because, as I said, I saw that one in Montana, but I had never gotten a chance to photograph northern goshawk. I did get an ID shot, sure, technically, but actually in terms of getting a even decent photograph, even just a straight up bad photo, but it's not like 2 pixels, I've never even gotten a chance to do that. So I was going into this really excited, and goshawks are gorgeous birds. They're very beautiful animals. Just their coloration, the eyebrow, the contrast in them. You have your other accipiters like Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks, right? Close relatives of goshawks. And they all look somewhat similar, but Cooper's and sharp-shinned look pretty close. And then you just have goshawks, which are significantly more striking. So I was really excited to get a chance to kind of get a closer, longer look at one of these birds. That's what I thought was going to happen. So one other important thing to note is while I'm walking up this trail, I'm not paying a lot of attention, right? There was one landmark that he told me about on the trail that to keep an eye out for, and that would tell you when you're in the area of the nest, but he said they'll freak out, and I knew they were aggressive. And I thought they were going to start squawking and, flying around back and forth, and I'd see them, and then I'd get some shots and leave, right? So I wasn't paying too much attention. I was just listening to the warblers, walking down the trail, having a great time, right? I walked down the trail for about 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, I hear this sound. And it's like, it's like a stereotypical raptor call. It's like, caw, 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 kind of like that. And I hear that, and I get really excited. So this is where the fun starts, right? So I hear that through the trees, and I look up, and I pick up my camera, and I start kind of bobbing my head around, and I'm like thinking I'm about to see a goshawk. I'm trying to look through the leaves and see this bird where it's perched, and I'm thinking I'm about to get a great photo. And then the last thought that I have, this little alarm siren of a call. Let me look this up real quick so you can hear what it sounds like. So this is what I start hearing through the trees. This is just a video I found on YouTube, but just like that, right? And I'm super stoked. I'm like, I'm about to see a goshawk. And the last thought that I have is, oh, that sound kind of sounds like it's getting louder. And suddenly this massive shape bursts out of the underbrush at eye level 4 feet from me and swoops at me, right? So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, massive bird, boom, right in front of my face, and then it shoots up and lands right above me, and then it perches high up on this tree, and it's silhouetted against the sun, and I'm just like, crap, this is not good, right? Because this is, a lot of people, a lot of scientists and stuff say that this is the most aggressive nest defending bird in the world. I'm not saying that is true. I'm just saying that I saw a lot of sources stating that, right? So I'm just sitting there, and this bird is silhouetted against the sky like the harbinger of death, and it's just staring at me. And two things are going through my mind. A few things, actually. The first thing is that I know how to deal with a lot of wildlife, right? Mainly because it's good things for me to know, so I research it a lot, but also I just like learning about animals. So I know how to handle bears really well, both black bear, brown bear, defensive behavior, predatory behavior, all that kind of stuff. I know how to handle encounters with canines. I know how to handle. I've actually had to use my knowledge on how to handle an encounter with moose before. Had to hide behind a tree from a moose that got 3 feet from me while I was walking up a trail. But the one thing I don't know how to handle an encounter with is an angry bird, right? And I've had the thought in my head a lot in the past, but there's not a lot of I've heard from other people who have gotten hit by a raptor, a great horned owl, large birds of prey, and they say it hurts, right? I know of people who've needed stitches. Some people say it feels like getting hit in the head with a bat. I've heard bad things, right? So my thought process throughout the entirety of my life was, okay, well, if I ever encounter an angry bird, I'll just run back the way I came from, right? Because it's not going to, unlike a bear or a wolf or a mountain lion, you're not going to potentially trigger a predatory response. Maybe a wolf isn't the best example there, but definitely with mountain lion or bear, right? You don't run from those, because if you run from them, they might be like, oh, snack, right? But with a bird of prey, it's just trying to get you out of its area. So all of a sudden, this bird's perched over my head, and I'm like, well, this is bad. And my brain's like, well, why don't we just run back down the trail and then figure it out later? So my plan was I'd run back down the trail, thinking it was going to leave me alone. Then I was only thinking about running 50 yards and then regroup and figure out what I was going to do from there. So I start running back down the trail where I came from. I'm not sprinting, but I'm just, kind of jogging, trying to, get out of its hair. Like, oh, I'm sorry for making you mad. And all of a sudden I hear the sound, the death siren coming back again. And I'm like, okay. And I'm running, and I pick up my speed, and it's getting closer, closer, closer. And it's coming in hot. This thing is coming for me, right? So at this point, I'm sprinting. This is a slight downhill on on a trail, right? So I'm running downhill at this point. And now I'm sprinting full speed. And it's getting closer, 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 closer to the point where it's right behind my head. And I'm like, I have to do something now. So what I do is I dive, full blown, an MLB player trying to go for a base. I completely head first, flying squirrel type shit into the air, dive, and crash onto the ground, right? And this is not a nice, soft dirt trail with a cover of moss carpet and pine needles. This is gravel and rocks and all kinds of not fun stuff. So I dive out of the way trying to dodge this little hell demon, and I crash onto the ground kind of like on my side. I land on my elbow. It's like torn up and bleeding now. And I land on my bear spray. I dented the crap out of my bear spray. And if that had punctured, this would have been the worst day of my life. But thankfully it didn't, right? So I crash onto the ground, barely missing the bird. It swerves off into the woods, and I hear it still going. And I'm kind of discombobulated, right? Because I'm just... You have to keep in mind, all of this happened over the course of like 30 seconds. So 35 seconds ago, I was on a peaceful walk through the mountains of Vermont. And now the next second, I'm like in my own personal interactive showing of fucking Jurassic Park, just fighting for my life, right? It's actually kind of beautiful. Like the sun rays are shining through the dust from my crash. And I'm looking around and I'm like, am I going to die? Right? Is this how it ends? And when I crashed on the ground, part of me was thinking that the bird was going to actually go up into the air and then turn around and dive bomb into some fucked up Mortal Kombat finisher move and kill me. But, so that didn't happen. So the bird went off into the woods, but I hear it coming back now. So I'm kind of out of it for a second, but then I grab all my stuff. Somehow my camera lived, right, which was great. I grab all my stuff. My hat came off during the jump, and I run down the trail, and I'm out of there, right? So I run like 100 yards, 150 yards, and then I start to slow down eventually. And I'm just walking out of the trail saying like, screw that, screw this, no. And I just keep saying that over and over again, less PC terminology, but you get the point. And I'm walking out of the trail, and I start laughing about how ridiculous of an encounter that was. And I'm doing the walk of shame out of the woods. And then this is where I messed up, right? This is where I did an oops. The little voice in my head started going. It's like, you woke up at 4 a.m. and you drove for 3 hours to get here. Are you gonna get beat by a bird? Like, are you serious, man? Right? So that voice is going on in the back of my head. It's like, come on, bro. Like, you're better than this. And one thing I started thinking about, and as I mentioned earlier, was that I was walking up the trail pretty fast and wasn't paying attention. So how I rationalized this was, okay, what probably happened is that I was walking fast, I wasn't paying attention, I caught the birds off guard, and maybe just stumbled like right underneath the nest on accident without knowing. Because I was like, there's no way my friend would send me down this trail if he knew I was going to get instantly headhunted the moment I got within any vicinity of the bird, right? So I'm thinking, and I call one of my friends up at this point, I'm telling him my traumatic experience, and he's laughing at me. And I'm like, well, I drove all this way, and right, and at this point, I'd given up the notion of getting a great shot, even a good shot. Like, I would have been happy with a far away, terrible image of the nest, or even just one of the adults perched outside of it, right? I'm talking to my friend, and I'm like, yeah, I really think if I am more cautious in my approach and I pay more attention, then I'll be able to see the bird before I get too close, and it'll be all fine and dandy. And he's like, yeah, that sounds good. I'm pretty sure he just wanted me to walk back down the trail so it could, like, try to rip my head off again, because that'd be funny. But so what I do, right, is I use the shorebird approach. And I don't know if you've photographed shorebirds before, but essentially when you're photographing shorebirds, you typically do it lying down. Now, I wasn't lying down like inchworming my way up the trail, right? But what you'll do with shorebirds is you'll lie down, and there's a big emphasis on slow approaching, just inch by inch by inch, and letting the birds become accustomed to you. Particularly with shorebirds like a tern or a skimmer or something of that nature, right? Something that's stationary. So my thought process was, okay, well, if I walk one step at a time up the trail, there's no way the bird's going to be angry about that, right? Like, there's no way. So that's what I do. And I spend 45 minutes regaining the ground that I lost in 30 seconds by sprinting. And what I do is every single step I pause and I look, like I'm full blown doing the whole owl head bob movement, looking back and forth. I'm just trying to get a look at one of the birds from a distance so I can like just get my first long look at a goshawk, right? So I'm doing that, and I'm going like straight up 45 minutes, step by step by step by step, and I get to the area where I had gotten attacked. And now I'm kind of like, I don't know what's going on. I'm really looking at this point. Like, I'm spending 5 minutes in between steps, deeply scanning every single tree in my vicinity. And I'm doing this. I'm paying a lot of attention. And I'm just being really quiet and slow. And then all of a sudden, I just hear caw, 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 like the bird going crazy again. And I'm just like, screw this. And I turn around and I start sprinting full speed down the trail. And my thought process was, okay, the first time that the bird had gone after me, when it came out of the underbrush and was right there, I had waited around after I had first heard the call and I was like, hey, where's the bird, right? And I had allowed it to catch up to me. So my thought process was, well, I'm in the same spot where where it had first started screaming at me, but it's off in the woods somewhere. If I start sprinting now, I'll be able to get out of its territory before it actually gets to me. So I turn around and I'm running for my life at this point, and it's still going in the background, and I hear it getting closer and closer and closer. But I'm not diving again, right? Like, I don't want to break a rib on a sharp rock out in the middle of Vermont in the mountains with no service, right? So I'm running, and it's getting closer and closer and closer. And I'm almost like calling its bluff. I'm just thinking, if I run fast enough, it's going to leave me alone and I'll be fine and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden just whack. I just feel this big thwack on the back of my head. And it had come up and grabbed the back of my head with one of its hands. And I don't remember if I had taken my hat off before I had started running so it wouldn't blow off, or if the bird had knocked the hat off of my head. But all I know is after this, my hat ended up in my hands. And I said I was running full speed before this happened, but after it had hit me in the head, like, I was wearing hiking boots, running down a gravelly, rocky trail. Bro, you could have put Usain Bolt next to me on a running track. I would have outran his ass instantly. I was flying down this hill after it had hit me. And the best look I got of the bird the whole day was after it had hit me in the head and it peeled off into the woods. I got to see its underside as it flew away. So I'm sprinting down the trail, and there's no secondary voice being like, oh, you got beat by a bird. Like, no, I was gone. And then I did the real walk of shame back to my car, laughing my ass off and not coming out of it with a single image. It was funny because after I'd posted a video on my story of my elbow all torn up, I got a bunch of people messaging me on Instagram like, did you get any photos at least? Like, no, I didn't get any photos. I was trying not to die, right? And yeah, and actually when it had grabbed me, it had left 4 talon marks on my head, or 3, a few on top and then 1 on the bottom, kind of going up the length of my neck, right where my hairline starts. And yeah, I didn't feel it. And honestly, the funny part was it didn't hurt when it happened at all. I think adrenaline was a little bit of a part of it, but by hurt, I mean, like, there was no real impact feeling. Like, I felt the bump, but it didn't hurt that bad. And I've heard from people that got attacked by smaller raptors saying it actually hurt a lot. I think part of it for me was that I was running so fast downhill that the bird didn't really have a lot of momentum to work with. Like, I was already running away from it super fast. I feel like I got off pretty easy because people can get messed up by birds of prey sometimes. So yeah, I didn't, no, there was no more secondary attempts after that. I did see a ruffed grouse on the road on my walk out. Light was terrible, and it flew when I was like 50 or 100 yards away. But that was pretty cool. But yeah, so goshawks are my new nemesis animal. I haven't had a nemesis animal for years, but I think this has to classify, right? I mean, it has to. I don't see why it wouldn't. But yeah, I know every time I go up north now, go hiking, I'm going to carry an umbrella with me because, like, you should have seen me for the rest of the day. Because actually, after this had happened, it was really early in the morning. I wasn't going to drive 3 hours back home. Like, that would be stupid. So I cut across the state to another location where you can photograph spruce grouse. And I went there to photograph those. Well, actually, I'd explored a few parks in the area where I'd photographed the goshawk. And then I went over there. So I probably got to the spruce grouse at around 3 p.m. But I was tweaking out for the rest of the day. Like, there was a point where I was walking, and it was a blue jay kind of like 30 feet away from me, and then the blue jay took off in my direction. I literally flinched. Like, I was scared of birds for the entirety of the day. There was at one point, I don't know what kind of bird it was. It might have been a Canada jay, maybe a blue jay, I don't know. But it did like a squawk call, right, at the same place with the spruce grouse, and I jumped again. Like, I was messed up, right? Thankfully, I haven't noticed any other issues with that, but if I ever hear that goshawk call again, I don't know what's going to happen. I might get some PTSD flashbacks or something. But yeah, anyways, I'm going to be carrying, along with my bear spray now, I'm going to be carrying a big umbrella whenever I go up north. Because if I ever hear that, I was going to take it out, pop it open, put it over my head, and then just run away. But yeah, so that was my encounter with probably, I'd argue, the prettiest hawk in North America. Maybe. There's some other, no, I mean, rough-leggeds are pretty nice looking. There's some other ones, but goshawks are gorgeous, and I'm excited to get a chance at photographing them one day. I don't know if I'm going to go back to this nest or not. I mean, if I do, I'm going to come kitted out with a full-blown, like, motorcycle helmet. Like, I'm going to purchase... I should get one of those bomb suits, you know, that they use to, like, defuse bombs and stuff. Show up, just, like, walking down the trail in this huge suit of body armor. Yeah, I honestly, to feel confident doing that again, that's probably what I'm going to have to do. But no, I mean, I'd like to get another crack at one of these animals. Maybe I'll try the nest again at a different time of year, see if they're a little less defensive. I ended up texting my friend that sent me down there. I was like, bro, what the hell? And he's like, oh, I've never had that happen before. So, yeah, that was funny. But we actually got to talking about it, and he had only been with, like, a group of people. So I think it was, like, him and 2 other people or something like that. And apparently the birds weren't as aggressive then. So my thought process, what I talked about him with, was either they're less willing to commit to an actual full-blown assault if there's more people, or something I was thinking is that he was there earlier in the year. I don't know if they had chicks then, like hatched, but I'm pretty sure by the time I had been there, the chicks had actually hatched. I didn't get to see the nest at all. The nest was probably 500 yards from me, but I'm pretty sure the nest had actually hatched by then and they had chicks. So either they're less willing to commit to an attack when there's multiple people, or they get more aggressive when the chicks have hatched, or it's some other option that I'm just completely not thinking about. But those are some things that crossed my mind. Anyways, it was an experience, and the funny part was I wasn't even close to the bird. I mean, it literally touched me, but I never even got a good long look at it. I never got an identifiable look and be like goshawk, except for the one where it flew away from me and I got to see its underside as it went into the trees. You know, even when it burst out of the bush like 4 feet from my face, it was just a big shape, like some Game of Thrones type shit, like a dragon, just like right there. And you know, so I definitely want to get a better look. And it was funny because part of me was thinking when it had landed on the tree, when it first came after me, part of me was thinking, I was like, okay, do I actually run, or maybe I should do a thing like you do with bears, like you stand your ground and be like, and get big. And I was thinking about that because part of me was like, well, maybe it won't be willing to commit to a full-blown impact, right, if I'm actually facing it. However, if I was trying to call its bluff and it actually committed anyways, then my eyes and my face were exposed, and I wasn't trying to go blind. I'd rather take a bonk to the back of the head than lose my eyeballs. So, yeah. But anyways, that was my encounter with the goshawk. Unfortunately, no photos. I'm going to try... goshawks definitely do seem like they're going to be a big priority for me for photos now because I really want a good shot of one. But yeah, so that's all I had for this one. Thought it was a fun story. Deserved its own episode. Didn't want to try and shoehorn it into another episode somewhere in an intro or something. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I will see you on the next one.